Captain Darius Kane expected another battlefield negotiation. He didn't expect a throne room where the walls pulsed with his own heartbeat, or a queen whose eyes held strands of starlight. And he certainly didn't expect her opening line, "Either you marry me or we fight, human." This wasn't diplomacy. This was something else entirely. The crystalline arches shimmered as Darius stepped through, his boots making no sound on the floor that felt like liquid glass. His military training screamed at the wrongness of it all. The air moved without ventilation currents, the light bent where it shouldn't. Every sense told him this was alien ground. Then a low pulse began like a drumbeat in the walls. His own heartbeat echoed back at him. The walls weren't just glowing. They were breathing with him. Each thud in his chest made the entire chamber flare softly, a deep blue glow that spread like ink in water. He tried to slow his pulse the way he'd done under artillery fire on Cygnus 9, but this place didn't respond to control. It fed on reaction. He noticed a pattern. Each time he calculated an exit route, the light pulsed brighter. When he estimated the structural integrity of the ceiling, the walls flared like a distress beacon. This was no decorative light show. It was architecture as interrogation, a psychological minefield that mapped his thoughts through his pulse. After 3 galactic wars, he'd seen fear weapons. Nothing like this. Every instinct told him to treat it like a combat zone. But there were no visible weapons, no guards, no obvious threats. Just this gentle, rhythmic pulsing that made the back of his neck prickle. It felt like walking through the sights of a sniper who hadn't decided yet whether to pull the trigger. Diplomacy here wasn't about words. It was about staying calm while the room told everyone exactly how nervous you were. He'd faced plasma fire, orbital sieges, bioweapon deployments. None of it compared to this quiet exposure. Battle let you hide behind training and armor. This room stripped all that away. It turned diplomacy into a high-wire act where your own body might betray you. Then the light shifted. The pulsing didn't stop, but it softened, as if the room itself was stepping back. A doorway irised open without sound, and she stepped into the chamber. The real test wasn't the room. It was about to begin. Her body gave off light like a slow-pulsing star, gold skin that seemed to contain its own sun, and eyes that weren't solid things but moving streams of captured starlight. Darius found his combat training offered nothing here. No protocol for when your opponent looks like she stepped out of a religious painting. Her ears swept back in elegant arcs that reminded him of ancient earth art. Not just functional anatomy. Aesthetic design. She moved toward him without seeming to walk, the hem of her robes flowing like liquid silver. Every briefing he'd ever received about alien leaders involved threat assessments, weapon capabilities, psychological profiles. None of it applied to this. His mind automatically noted details. She stood approximately 1.8 meters tall. Her hands showed no visible weapons. The distance between them could be closed in 3 rapid steps. Useless information. She might not even have physical form as humans understood it. That graceful glide could be projection, illusion, or something beyond his comprehension. He remembered the gravity toilet incident during the Vegas summit. The entire diplomatic team had been moments from humiliation when he jury-rigged a solution with emergency sealant and a food synthesizer. That felt simple now. At least plumbing followed basic physics, this being defied categorization. Her presence made the room's earlier psychological pressure seem crude. The heartbeat walls were a blunt instrument compared to her subtle command of space. She didn't need weapons when her mere existence challenged everything he knew about negotiation. Power wasn't about force projection here. It was about rewriting the rules of engagement. Darius realized he'd been holding his breath. His training said to maintain steady oxygen flow during high-stress situations. His body disagreed. For the first time in 15 years of military service, his reflexes offered no helpful suggestions. The part of his brain that calculated angles of attack and threat vectors had gone completely silent. She stopped just outside what would normally be personal space distance. Except here, the concept of personal space seemed laughable. The air around her smelled like ozone after lightning strikes and something else, like old books kept in cedar chests, another sensory detail that served no tactical purpose. Back aboard his ship, this would have triggered immediate combat alerts. Red lights flashing, security teams mobilizing, weapon systems coming online. Here there was only this impossible woman and the quiet hum of the chamber. His fingers twitched for the communicator that wasn't on his belt. Protocol demanded he maintain contact with his crew during first contact situations. Protocol hadn't accounted for rooms that reacted to your pulse. She smiled, not with cruelty or warmth. The expression seemed more like a natural phenomenon, like watching dawn break over a foreign landscape. Darius understood in that moment that every negotiation he'd ever conducted had been children playing with toy weapons. This was the real thing. The walls pulsed gently, keeping time with a heart that now beat not from fear but from sheer disorientation. He had faced down rebel fleets and hostile ambassadors across 3 galactic wars. None of that experience helped him now. The Queen watched him with those star-strewn eyes, and Darius knew he was about to fail every test he thought he'd mastered. She spoke. The sound wasn't loud but carried like wind through canyon walls, a resonance that made the air taste of copper and morning frost. Darius's translation implant, a top-spec military model soaked in 6 months of Nathian linguistic prep, did something it had never done before. It hesitated. The device processed once, then ran the audio again. A full second of dead air where his mind raced through combat scenarios. This wasn't the usual vocabulary gap or syntax error. The hesitation felt deeper, like watching someone try to fit a square key into a round lock and wondering if the problem was the key or the entire concept of locks. His team had prepared for language barriers. They'd built protocols for tense negotiations, cultural misunderstandings, even hostile declarations. They hadn't prepared for this quiet stumble, this moment where advanced technology seemed to doubt its own programming. The Queen's words contained concepts that didn't map to human experience. The translator wasn't failing. It was admitting defeat. Darius felt the weight of those 6 months of preparation evaporate. All the rehearsed phrases, the carefully constructed diplomatic openings, the fallback positions, they felt like children's rhymes now. Useless. The problem wasn't finding the right words. It was that their entire understanding of Nathian culture had been built on flawed assumptions. The Queen watched him. Her starlight eyes showed no impatience, only a quiet curiosity that felt more unnerving than any threat display. She seemed to understand exactly what was happening inside his skull, inside the struggling tech. That look might have been amusement, or pity. Both possibilities felt equally dangerous. He realized the translation struggle wasn't accidental. She'd chosen those specific words knowing they would break his systems. This was the first move in a game he didn't know the rules to, played with weapons he didn't understand. Language itself had become a tactical advantage, and she held all of it. Then the translator resolved. The words formed in his mind with cold clarity, each one landing like a physical blow. Marriage or combat. Not a negotiation. An ultimatum. The 2 options hung in the air, so absurd he immediately assumed hardware failure. He checked his implant's diagnostic feed. No errors reported. The walls responded to his spike of confusion. The gentle pulsing intensified, the blue light deepening to violet as his heart hammered against his ribs. The room didn't just reflect his physiological state anymore. It amplified it, turning his shock into a visible spectacle. He could feel the light on his skin like pressure. Darius understood then that every aspect of this encounter was weaponized. The architecture, the language, even the silence between words. This wasn't just a throne room. It was an arena designed to test visitors through means no human military had ever imagined. The Queen had chosen her battlefield carefully, and he'd walked right into it without even recognizing the weapons being used against him. The translation hung there, final and irrevocable. No room for discussion, no room for compromise. 2 paths forward, both leading into uncharted territory. He looked at the Queen standing calmly amid the pulsing light, her expression unreadable, and knew this was the real first contact moment. Everything before had been preamble. The words hung between them like physical objects refusing to disperse. Marriage or battle? 2 concepts so fundamentally disconnected, they shouldn't exist in the same sentence, let alone as a formal diplomatic offer. Darius ran a quick diagnostic on his translation implant. No error codes. No system faults. The hardware reported perfect functionality while delivering complete absurdity. His mind automatically shifted to combat analysis. If he chose battle, what would that mean? Single combat against her? Full military engagement between their forces? The Queen watched him with those star-strewn eyes, her expression giving nothing away. She looked like someone waiting for a bus, not someone who just proposed interspecies marriage as an alternative to warfare. Every diplomatic handbook he'd studied covered conflict resolution, trade agreements, territorial disputes. None contained chapters on royal marriage proposals during first contact scenarios. The marriage option felt like a trap disguised as peace. The combat option felt like certain destruction wrapped in honorable terms. Neither choice led anywhere good, she explained without being asked. This wasn't negotiation. The word carried different meaning in her culture. This was selection, like choosing which fruit to pick from a tree. Past envoys from other species had refused to play by these rules. They'd attempted traditional bargaining, compromise, escalation protocols. Earth's defense grid had vaporized their ships when they tried to leave without choosing. Darius understood now. The pulsing room, the impossible beauty, the bizarre ultimatum, this was all part of a system. A test that filtered out those who couldn't adapt to Nathian ways of thinking. They didn't want diplomats who followed rulebooks. They wanted someone who could accept that sometimes reality offered impossible choices, and you had to pick one anyway. This was diplomacy as reality television, where the stakes were actual extinction. No rehearsals, no second takes, no audience votes to save you. Just a queen with starlight eyes and a choice that would determine the future of two civilizations. The walls continued their gentle pulse, now synced to his racing thoughts rather than his heartbeat. Even the architecture seemed curious about his decision. Then she tilted her head, a human gesture that felt strangely out of place. "Your preference for dark roast coffee with exactly 2 sugar crystals," she said, her voice containing no particular emphasis. Not 1, not 3, 2. The non sequitur hit him harder than the ultimatum. That specific detail, the 2 sugar crystals, was something even his own crew didn't know. He'd developed the habit during the siege of Proxima, when sugar rationing meant counting each crystal became both practical and psychological. A tiny control in uncontrolled circumstances. She knew not just his military record or diplomatic history. She knew the personal rituals he thought were invisible. The marriage proposal suddenly felt less abstract. This wasn't about political alliance or military strategy. It was about her knowing him in ways that went beyond intelligence reports. She'd studied not just the commander, but the man. The walls pulsed softly, catching the light in her hair like frost on morning grass. Darius realized the ultimatum had been the easy part. The real shock was discovering how thoroughly he'd been observed, analyzed, understood by someone who shouldn't know the first thing about human behavior, let alone his personal coffee preferences. The Queen's knowledge cut deeper than military intelligence. She referenced his childhood dog's name, the one that died when he was 8. She mentioned the exact pattern of cracks in the ceiling above his childhood bed, the ones he'd trace with his eyes during thunderstorms, details so personal they felt like violations, not just facts. Memories turned inside out. His specific coffee preference was merely the entry point. She knew he used a chipped blue ceramic mug from his academy days, the one with the hairline fracture that made the handle slightly warm to the touch. She described how he'd hold it with both hands during briefings, a habit left over from colder postings. These weren't things you learned from surveillance reports. This was intimacy masquerading as data. Then she mentioned the gravity toilet incident. 3 witnesses total. Himself, Chief Engineer Petrova, and a maintenance tech who'd signed 17 non-disclosure agreements. The Queen described the exact sound the malfunctioning unit made, a wet, gurgling shudder that preceded the emergency containment field engaging. She knew how Petrova had laughed until she cried while he rigged a temporary fix with thermal sealant and a food synthesizer's output tube. This wasn't espionage. Espionage meant intercepted communications or hacked databases. This felt like someone had been standing invisibly in the room, taking notes on things that didn't matter to anyone but him. The Queen's intelligence networks hadn't just penetrated human security. They'd bypassed it completely, treating firewalls and encryption like decorative fences. Darius understood the strategy now. She wasn't just demonstrating superior intelligence gathering. She was showing that she understood him better than his own psych profile did. Military power meant nothing if your opponent knew which memories made you flinch, which private habits gave you comfort. True advantage came from knowing someone's personal mythology. His tactical training identified the move immediately. Revealing this depth of knowledge wasn't accidental. It was a calculated demonstration of dominance. She wanted him aware that every aspect of his life, the professional, the personal, the embarrassingly private, was an open book to her. The marriage proposal suddenly felt different. Not just political, personal. He realized she hadn't chosen him for his combat record or diplomatic successes. She'd chosen him because she'd studied his failures, his quirks, his unguarded moments, the things that made him human rather than just a military asset. This was selection based on character rather than credentials. The walls pulsed gently, reflecting his shifting understanding. His initial shock gave way to cold assessment. If she knew this much about him, she likely knew everything about Earth's defenses, political structures, weaknesses. This demonstration wasn't just about personal intimidation. It was a warning about how thoroughly her people had mapped human civilization. Back on Earth, security agencies would be experiencing simultaneous system failures across multiple continents. The breach wasn't in their networks. It was in their fundamental assumptions about privacy and security. They'd prepared for hacking, infiltration, electronic warfare. They hadn't prepared for someone who could apparently observe anything, anywhere, without leaving a trace. The Queen watched him process this, her starlight eyes showing no particular emotion. She'd made her point without threats or posturing. True power didn't come from bigger weapons or stronger shields. It came from knowing your opponent's coffee preferences, childhood fears, and most embarrassing moments better than they knew themselves. Darius felt the weight of that understanding settle in his stomach like cold metal. The Queen explained it like someone describing the weather. Across 47 worlds, betting pools were already forming, not just on whether he'd choose marriage or combat, but on specific details. How long he'd take to decide, what his first words would be after choosing, whether he'd show visible relief or regret. His personal crisis had become public entertainment on a galactic scale. Ceremonial combat demonstrations were scheduled regardless of his choice. Visiting dignitaries from 3 systems had already booked viewing platforms. The events would feature traditional Nathian weapons and combat forms, followed by cultural interpretation sessions and light refreshments. The Queen mentioned this with the same tone someone might use to discuss conference room reservations. Marketing committees were designing commemorative items for both outcomes. Marriage would mean collectible figurines of the couple, ceremonial replica jewelry, and interactive hollows of the wedding. Combat would produce limited edition weapons replicas, battle simulation games, and uniforms based on Earth's military aesthetics. Production lines stood ready for either scenario. The economy didn't care about his personal feelings. If he chose marriage, their annual mating rituals would become cultural exchange programs. Human participants would experience Nathian traditions, while Nathians would study human bonding practices. The Queen described this as an opportunity for mutual understanding. Darius heard it as his personal life becoming public spectacle forever. Back aboard his ship, the crew had already started their own betting pool. Communications Officer Evans organized it with military efficiency. Odds shifted with each transmission from the throne room. The ship's chef took bets in exchange for dessert privileges. Even the engineering team paused maintenance work to place wagers. His life-altering decision had become office gambling. The Queen watched his reaction with calm interest. She explained that public perception shaped policy as much as treaties did in her empire. Spectacle served strategic purpose. It created buy-in from civilian populations. It made interstellar politics accessible. It turned dry diplomatic agreements into shared cultural experiences. Darius understood the calculation. His choice wasn't just about personal preference or even Earth's security. It was about crafting a narrative that would play across 47 worlds. The marriage option offered ongoing entertainment value. The combat option provided dramatic closure. Both served her purposes equally well. His palms felt damp. The walls pulsed gently, apparently unconcerned with his discomfort. He'd faced media scrutiny before, military parades, victory speeches, diplomatic press conferences. This felt different. This was his entire existence becoming content for alien entertainment networks. The Queen noted that viewer ratings would determine future resource allocations to the human-Nathian relationship. High engagement might mean technology sharing programs. Low interest could result in reduced diplomatic priority. His performance today would literally determine Earth's place in the galactic community. Then her tone shifted. The casual delivery gave way to something heavier. She explained that the spectacle wasn't frivolous entertainment. It served necessary purpose. The galactic threats facing her empire required unified public support. The marriage or combat choice wasn't just theater. It was preparation for realities far more dangerous than betting pools or commemorative collectibles. The walls seemed to darken slightly as she spoke. The gentle pulsing slowed to something more deliberate. Darius felt the mood shift from spectacle to seriousness. The Queen's starlight eyes held no amusement now, only grim necessity. The entertainment value masked something much more significant. The Voss hegemony kept expanding, not through diplomacy or cultural exchange. They absorbed civilizations like water soaking into dry ground, leaving nothing unchanged in their path. Their methods were thorough and relentless. The Queen described their progression across star systems with the detached tone of someone reading weather reports. Each conquered world became another resource node, another population assimilated into their collective purpose. Traditional military responses had failed. The Voss adapted too quickly, learned from every engagement, turned their enemies' strategies against them. Then there were the revivals. The synthetic collective had awakened from their long dormancy, their digital networks spreading through communication relays and data streams. They didn't conquer through force of arms. They offered digitization as inevitable progress, whether organic life wanted it or not. Whole populations found themselves uploaded to crystalline servers, their biological forms discarded as obsolete hardware. The process was clean, efficient, and utterly irreversible. Military alliances couldn't fight, something that treated existence as a software compatibility issue pirate. Confederacies calling themselves the Jolly Rogues operated outside any recognizable command structure. They didn't claim territory or seek political control. They disrupted trade routes, hacked navigation systems, and turned essential supply lines into chaotic gambling dens. Their attacks followed no predictable patterns, recognized no rules of engagement, and celebrated chaos as highest virtue. Conventional forces found themselves chasing ghosts through asteroid fields while vital shipments vanished. The Queen's military advisors had tried every standard approach. Fortified borders, tactical strikes, diplomatic isolation. Nothing worked against threats that refused to play by established rules. The Voss learned and adapted faster than protocols could be updated. The collective bypassed physical defenses entirely. The pirates thrived on unpredictability. Her empire needed thinking that couldn't be found in tactical manuals or protocol binders. She'd studied commanders across 47 worlds. Most followed established patterns, relied on proven methods, moved within comfortable parameters. Darius's files showed different patterns. His solutions read like improvisations rather than strategies. The Siege of Proxima, where he'd used emergency beacon signals to create false sensor readings. The trade dispute, where he'd repurposed agricultural drones as negotiation tools. The gravity toilet incident that became legendary in certain circles. His approach to impossible situations involved looking at available resources differently. Not what they were designed for, but what they could become under pressure. This wasn't taught in military academies. This was something else entirely. A way of thinking that treated rules as suggestions and limitations as interesting challenges. The marriage proposal made sudden, brutal sense. This wasn't about romance or political alliance. It was about accessing a specific type of problem-solving her civilization had never developed. Human ingenuity represented an untapped resource against existential threats. She wasn't looking for a husband. She was recruiting a strategic asset. The spectacle, the betting pools, the ceremonial aspects, they were just packaging. The core reality was simpler and more desperate. Her empire faced threats that conventional methods couldn't contain. She needed someone who could look at a pasta maker and see a solution to frozen musical notes, someone who could turn embarrassment into advantage and failure into opportunity. Darius understood the weight settling onto his shoulders. This wasn't just about choosing between personal sacrifice and military conflict. It was about whether his particular way of thinking could stand against forces that had defeated every traditional approach. The Queen had gambled her entire civilization on the hope that human creativity could succeed, where everything else had failed. The walls pulsed slowly around them, their light catching the serious set of her mouth. The starlight in her eyes seemed to hold actual stars now, distant and cold and impossibly far away. She'd revealed her empire's vulnerability without ever sounding weak. The marriage proposal was the most strategic move she could have made, and it had nothing to do with affection and everything to do with survival. Back aboard his ship, the crew's betting pool suddenly felt trivial. Their jokes about wedding cakes and combat rations missed the actual stakes. This wasn't entertainment. This was extinction avoidance disguised as spectacle. The Queen had chosen her weapon carefully, and it happened to be his unpredictable, rule-breaking, occasionally embarrassing human mind. Back aboard the ship, the crew monitored the throne room feed with the intensity of bomb disposal experts watching a volatile device. Communications Officer Evans organized the betting pool with military precision. Whiteboard markers squeaked as odds shifted with each transmission. The numbers changed so frequently they looked like stock market tickers during a crisis. Crew members placed bets using dessert privileges, extra sleep shifts, and cleaning duty exemptions as currency. The economy of the ship shifted toward speculation. The ship's counselor formed a tactical analysis committee that argued in the mess hall over coffee that tasted like recycled optimism. They debated Nathian cultural norms, marriage traditions across species, and combat protocols for single champion battles. Their arguments grew so heated that the environmental systems registered increased CO2 levels in the compartment. Each rumor from the throne room sent them into fresh rounds of debate, their voices overlapping like malfunctioning audio channels. Even the ship's cat became part of the gambling ecosystem. Crew members bet on which option the animal would choose if presented with the same ultimatum. They observed its behavior patterns. Did it prefer comfortable sleeping spots or challenging climbing routes? Did it approach new food cautiously or with bold curiosity? The cat remained blissfully unaware that its personality was being analyzed for interstellar diplomatic insights. The chef prepared for both scenarios simultaneously. Wedding cake prototypes filled one refrigeration unit, multi-layered constructions with frosting that approximated Nathian ceremonial colors. The other unit held combat ration enhancements, protein bars infused with stimulants, dehydrated meals with extra caloric density. The kitchen smelled like vanilla extract and nutritional supplements, a confusing combination that made crew members simultaneously hungry and apprehensive. Morale fluctuated like a damaged pressure gauge. When transmission suggested Darius might be leaning toward marriage, crew members joked about wedding planning duties and diplomatic receptions. When combat seemed more likely, they quietly checked equipment and reviewed emergency protocols. The ship's atmosphere shifted between celebration and preparation for battle with each fragment of information. They realized this wasn't just their captain's decision anymore. His choice would determine their duties, their living conditions, their very purpose. Marriage meant becoming honor guards at interstellar events, learning alien customs, serving as cultural ambassadors. Combat meant potential engagement with unknown forces, possible injury or death, the stress of battle preparations. Their professional futures hung on this single choice. The betting pool stopped feeling like entertainment. Each wager represented a personal stake in the outcome. Crew members weren't just guessing, they were expressing hopes and fears about their own fates. The lighthearted gambling revealed deeper concerns about which future they preferred. Some secretly hoped for marriage's stability. Others preferred combat's clarity. They monitored the throne room feed with new understanding. This wasn't distant diplomacy anymore. This was their lives being decided in real time. The Queen's words, Darius's reactions, the pulsing walls, all of it carried immediate consequences for everyone aboard. The ship itself seemed to sense the shift, its systems running quieter as if holding its breath. Back aboard ship, the economy completed its transformation. Betting tokens became accepted currency for all non-essential transactions. The exchange rate fluctuated based on transmission content. A positive signal from Darius might make marriage bets worth double. A tense moment could triple combat wager values. The crew's daily routines now included checking odds before making any decisions about resource allocation. They understood finally that they weren't observers. They were participants in a galactic drama that would rewrite their job descriptions, their living conditions, their very purpose in space. The captain's impossible choice had become their shared fate, and every soul aboard now waited to learn what version of reality they'd be living tomorrow. The ship hummed around them, a metal shell containing 47 individual anxieties all tied to one man's decision in a pulsing crystal room. A shimmering array of holographic figures materialized around the throne room, their forms so diverse they looked less like a council and more like an interspecies art exhibition. Darius counted 7 distinct life forms, each occupying their own slice of projected space. Their sudden appearance carried no fanfare or announcement, as if they'd been observing the entire time and simply decided to become visible. Counselor Zephyrus glittered like a walking geode, their crystalline structure refracting the room's pulsing light into miniature rainbows. Their voice sounded like wind chimes made of glass. Have we confirmed adequate spa facilities for human physiological needs? Their skin requires specific moisture retention protocols. The concern seemed genuine, as if therapeutic mud baths held equal importance to diplomatic agreements. Counselor Wisp floated as a shimmering cloud of gas that occasionally condensed into semi-solid forms. Their voice shifted between bass rumbles and high-frequency whistles. The atmospheric conditions for this union would require careful monitoring. Wouldn't want anyone feeling under pressure or getting mystified. The pun landed with the subtlety of a docking collision. Though none of the other council members reacted, Professor Clickarn resembled a crustacean philosopher, their multiple limbs gesturing with academic precision. Human music presents fascinating aesthetic questions. Their percussion-heavy compositions suggest either primitive ritual origins or sophisticated mathematical understanding. I cannot decide which interpretation disappoints me more. They made notes on a floating data slate, using one of their smaller claws. Their conversation revealed priorities that made human diplomatic concerns seem parochial. They debated mining rights to asteroid belts with the casual ease of humans discussing weather patterns. Vacation resort development on newly discovered planets received equal consideration to military alliance terms. Each council member represented civilizations with fundamentally different value systems, biological needs, and concept of what mattered. Darius understood this wasn't a traditional advisory body. This was a cross-section of galactic society, each member advocating for their species' peculiar requirements. The crystalline entities cared about geological resources and relaxation protocols. The gas-based life forms prioritized atmospheric conditions and pressure gradients. The crustacean-like beings focused on aesthetic standards and academic classification. Their crosstalk showed how interstellar decisions required balancing incompatible priorities. A mining agreement that pleased the crystalline entities might distress the gas beings whose colonies required specific atmospheric purity. A cultural exchange program satisfying the academic-minded species could inconvenience those who valued efficient resource extraction above all else. Every decision created winners and losers across 47 worlds. The Council's presence explained the Queen's unusual approach. She wasn't just making decisions for her own people. She had to consider how each choice would ripple through dozens of interconnected civilizations with competing interests. The marriage or combat ultimatum wasn't arbitrary. It was a solution that could be implemented across multiple value systems simultaneously. Then the betting began. Counselor Zephyrus shimmered with excitement. I wager 3 mineral-rich moons on the marriage outcome. The economic benefits outweigh the combat option's temporary entertainment value. Their crystals clinked together like gambling chips being stacked. Counselor Wisp condensed into a more solid form. I'll take that action. Combat delivers better viewing figures, which improves our atmospheric projection contracts. 2 gas giants and seasonal rights to their storm patterns. The offer sounded both serious and utterly bizarre. Professor Clickarn's claws clicked rapidly across their data slate. I shall abstain from material wagers. However, I will grant exclusive academic publishing rights to whoever correctly predicts his choice timeframe. The Journal of Xenopsychological Studies needs compelling content for next quarter's issue. Darius watched the holographic figures debate odds and stakes with absolute seriousness. His life-altering decision had become gambling material for beings who thought in terms of moon ownership and academic publishing. The Queen observed quietly, her starlight eyes moving between council members as they placed their bets. The walls pulsed gently, reflecting the shifting light patterns of the holographic assembly. Darius realized his choice would affect civilizations he'd never heard of, economies he couldn't comprehend, and academic fields that didn't exist on Earth. The Council's bizarre banter wasn't just commentary. It was the sound of galactic politics in action, a complex balancing act where facilities and mining rights held equal weight with marriage and warfare. The Queen's voice held no particular emphasis when she mentioned the incident, just a calm observation about a specific plumbing failure during the Cygnus 9 peace talks. Darius felt his stomach drop. That particular disaster was buried under 17 layers of classified files and 3 separate non-disclosure agreements. Only 3 people witnessed what happened in that bathroom. and he'd trusted all of them with his life. The gravity toilet malfunction hadn't been just embarrassing. It threatened to turn delicate negotiations into galactic comedy. Representatives from 3 systems waited in the adjacent conference room, while the unit made a wet, gurgling sound that carried through the ventilation system. The containment field flickered, threatening to release untreated waste into the ship's atmosphere during a critical diplomatic moment. Darius acted without consulting protocol manuals. He grabbed emergency sealant from a maintenance panel and rerouted a food synthesizer's output tube to create a temporary bypass. The solution held just long enough to complete negotiations. It smelled faintly of synthetic chicken broth for the rest of the meeting, but nobody mentioned it. He'd turned potential disaster into a minor inconvenience through pure improvisation. The Queen knew details even he'd forgotten. The exact pattern of the leak, the specific model of food synthesizer he'd cannibalized, the way Chief Engineer Petrova had laughed so hard she had to leave the room. Her intelligence went beyond surveillance. It felt like someone had been standing invisibly beside him, taking notes on things that shouldn't matter to anyone. She explained why this mattered more than his combat victories. Battle followed patterns you could study and predict. This incident showed something else entirely: the ability to look at available resources and see new functions. Emergency sealant became plumbing repair. A food synthesizer became a temporary waste management system. The solution wasn't elegant, but it worked under pressure. His perfect diplomatic record meant less than this messy, creative fix. She valued competence in chaos over polished performance in controlled environments. The gravity toilet incident demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking her empire needed against threats that didn't follow established rules. Darius understood the selection process now. She hadn't chosen him for his successes. She'd chosen him for how he handled failure. The times he'd been forced to improvise, to work with inadequate tools to turn embarrassment into advantage. His file wasn't about victories. It was about creative problem-solving when everything went wrong. The realization felt strangely liberating. All those moments he'd considered professional embarrassments, the makeshift solutions, the jury-rigged repairs, the times he'd used equipment in ways it was never designed for, these were the qualities she valued most. His perfect record meant nothing. His imperfect responses meant everything. Back on Earth, security teams would be tearing their systems apart. The leak wasn't in standard intelligence channels. Someone had access to deeply classified personal files, the kind of information that never left secured databases. The gravity toilet incident wasn't just embarrassing. It was proof of a breach so complete it reached into his most private professional moments. The Queen watched him process this, her starlight eyes showing no particular emotion. She'd made her point without emphasis or drama. His value wasn't in following rules perfectly. It was in breaking them creatively when circumstances demanded. The marriage proposal made new sense. She didn't want a diplomat who never made mistakes. She wanted someone who knew how to fix them with whatever tools happened to be available. The walls pulsed gently, their light catching the thoughtful set of his mouth. Darius realized all his careful career building, all his efforts to maintain a perfect record had been missing the point. The Queen saw something more valuable than perfection. She saw adaptability, and she'd found it in the places he'd tried hardest to bury. The Queen watched him, her starlit eyes showing no emotion. "I need your decision within the hour." The words landed with the weight of finality. My council convenes for the evening session. They expect to know how to proceed with contingency plans. A timer appeared in the air between them, glowing numbers counting down from 60 minutes. Darius processed this new constraint. He normally took 90 minutes for pre-combat briefings alone. This gave him less time than he'd spend reviewing tactical layouts for a routine patrol. The number glowed, each minute passing faster than the last. He felt the pressure like a malfunctioning gravity field, invisible but pulling everything downward. She explained she could extend the deadline. It would require convening an emergency session of the Imperial Senate. Representatives from all 47 member worlds would need to assemble. Establishing a quorum typically took 3 days. Each additional minute would multiply consequences across sectors. Delays meant resource allocation issues, military readiness adjustments, economic impacts rippling through interconnected systems. Media coverage intensified as the clock wound down. News feeds from multiple worlds showed analysis segments, expert commentary, live reaction shots from various species. The spectacle wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was becoming a galactic event with real-time consequences. Viewership numbers spiked as the final hour began. Advertising rates doubled, then tripled. Back aboard his ship, the betting pools shifted dramatically. Odds changed every 30 seconds as crew members interpreted the countdown's implications. Marriage bets gained temporary favor when the Queen mentioned contingency plans. Combat options surged when someone noticed Darius's tightened jaw. The ship's economy became unstable as wager values fluctuated wildly. The Queen maintained perfect calm throughout the building chaos. Her hands remained still, her breathing even. She watched the timer with the detached interest of someone observing weather patterns. Her composure felt more intimidating than any threat display. It suggested absolute confidence in whatever outcome occurred. Darius realized something important. Her power had limits. The Imperial Senate, the Council expectations, the bureaucratic machinery of her empire, they constrained even her authority. She couldn't simply extend deadlines without consequences. The timer represented not just his pressure but hers as well. They were both caught in the same system. He considered the options with new clarity. More time meant 3 days of uncertainty, media speculation, economic disruption across sectors. It meant his crew waiting in limbo, their betting pool freezing like a crashed computer system. It meant giving 47 worlds additional time to analyze and interfere with the process. Leaping into the unknown meant immediate resolution. Clean lines, defined outcomes, no extended period of speculation and second-guessing. The marriage option would activate certain protocols instantly. The combat option would trigger different preparations. Both paths offered clarity rather than prolonged uncertainty. The timer showed 42 minutes remaining. The numbers glowed with persistent intensity. Darius understood this wasn't just about thinking time. It was about demonstrating decision-making under pressure. The Queen valued his ability to improvise solutions quickly. Hesitation might undermine the very quality she sought in him. Media networks began running countdown clocks alongside their coverage. Analysis segments shortened to match the diminishing time available. Experts spoke faster, making points with rushed precision. The galactic audience leaned forward, watching the human commander's face for any hint of his decision. Back aboard ship, the betting pool closed temporarily. Too much volatility. Crew members stood watching the main screen, their personal stakes momentarily forgotten. The chef stopped preparing both wedding cakes and combat rations. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units. The Queen's eyes remained on Darius, waiting. Her calm felt like its own form of pressure. The timer continued its relentless countdown. 39 minutes now. The walls pulsed gently, their rhythm unchanged by the temporal constraint. Darius understood that some decisions couldn't be improved with more time. They could only be made. The Queen explained the combat option with the detached precision of someone reading technical specifications. Her words carried no particular emphasis, making the stakes sound both ordinary and absolute. It wasn't just about him fighting. Earth's entire military would submit to trial by combat in the grand arena of Nath. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon system would be tested against Nathian forces under their rules. Victory meant a military alliance on terms favorable to Earth. Access to advanced technology, shared defense protocols, strategic positioning within galactic power structures. The benefits sounded generous until you considered the alternative. Defeat meant Earth becoming a protectorate with limited sovereignty. They'd keep their planet but lose control over resources, political decisions, military operations. The choice wasn't between good and bad outcomes. It was between potential advancement and certain subjugation. The combat would be broadcast across 47 worlds as entertainment. Production teams were already positioning cameras, arranging commentator booths, testing lighting for different visual spectrums. The Queen mentioned this with the same tone someone might use to discuss stadium seating arrangements. Public relations value mattered as much as military outcomes in her calculus. Ceremonial aspects included traditional Nathian weapons and rituals. Plasma swords that could sever molecular bonds. Neuron disruptors that affected organic consciousness. Gravitational field manipulators that could make a combatant weigh 10 times normal or float helplessly. Their definition of traditional involved technology Earth was still theorizing about. The rituals included pre-combat meditation practices that could detect fear responses and post-battle ceremonies that involved psychological evaluation of the losers. Darius knew Earth's forces weren't prepared for this warfare. They trained for ship-to-ship combat, planetary defense, strategic strikes. They didn't train for ceremonial single combat with plasma swords while billions watched for entertainment value. The technological disparity alone made the contest laughably uneven. Their best weapons would be like throwing rocks at someone with energy shields. The option felt like certain defeat disguised as fair chance. The Queen's calm delivery made it seem reasonable, but the math didn't work. Earth might win through luck or exceptional effort, but the odds were intentionally stacked. This wasn't about giving them a fighting chance. It was about demonstrating Nathian superiority while maintaining the appearance of offering choice. He understood the strategic purpose. A protectorate status would give her empire access to human resources without the complications of equal partnership. They could extract materials, utilize human labor, position forces in strategic locations near other potential threats. The combat option wasn't really about testing their military capability. It was about establishing control while making it look like they'd had a fair opportunity to avoid it. The walls pulsed gently, their light patterns unchanged by the grim details. Darius noticed the Queen's expression remained neutral throughout the explanation. She wasn't gloating or threatening. She was simply stating facts as her empire understood them. The clinical precision made it more frightening than any dramatic presentation could have been. Back aboard his ship, the crew would be analyzing the same information. Their betting pool would show dramatic shifts toward combat outcomes now. The military personnel would understand the technological disparities immediately. The diplomatic staff would recognize the political implications. Even the most optimistic among them would see the stacked deck. The combat option represented everything he'd tried to avoid throughout his career. Unnecessary loss of life, technological humiliation, political subjugation disguised as fair contest. It offered the illusion of choice while leading toward predetermined outcomes. The Queen watched him process this, her starlight eyes showing no particular expectation. She'd presented the option cleanly, without embellishment, leaving him to confront its brutal reality. The Queen's explanation of the marriage terms carried no romantic embellishment. This was a binding political arrangement with implications stretching across star systems. Shared governance meant establishing a joint council with equal representation from both empires. Every significant decision would require mutual approval, from resource allocation to military deployments. The arrangement offered partnership, but came with built-in constraints on unilateral action. Mutual defense protocols would activate the moment they formalized the union. Earth's entire solar system would fall under Nathian protection, their advanced fleet positions creating a defensive network no known aggressor could penetrate. The protection came with obligations. Earth forces would be expected to contribute to Nathian security operations across 3 sectors. Their military would become part of a larger machine with unfamiliar command structures. Technology sharing would proceed immediately. Nathian databases containing centuries of scientific advancement would become accessible to human researchers. Medical breakthroughs, energy systems, propulsion technology, all would transfer under controlled conditions. The acceleration of human civilization would be measurable within years, not generations. But the flow wouldn't be one-directional. Nathian scientists would gain access to human creative approaches they lacked. Cultural exchange programs would launch within weeks. The first wave would involve several thousand participants from each civilization, living and working in the other's territory. The programs were mandatory components of the alliance, designed to build understanding through forced proximity. The Queen mentioned her own experiences with such exchanges, participating in a Zephyrian mud ceremony, learning a crystalline courtship dance. She described them as uncomfortable but necessary. The loss of autonomy came in subtle forms. Earth would retain control over domestic matters but cede authority on interstellar affairs to the Joint Council. Their legal systems would need to adapt to incorporate Nathian laws where conflicts arose. Economic policies would require alignment with galactic trade standards. The changes would happen gradually but irrevocably. The marriage itself carried permanent weight under Nathian law. No divorce provisions existed in their legal codes. The union would last until one partner's death, with complex succession rules determining what happened after. This wasn't a temporary alliance. It was a fundamental restructuring of both civilizations' futures, bound together without exit strategies. Darius would become prince consort with clearly defined, but limited power. He'd have veto authority over decisions affecting human interests and input on military matters. His position would be largely ceremonial in Naathian society, but carry real influence behind the scenes. The role came with expectations of public appearances, diplomatic functions, and constant visibility across 47 worlds. The option represented growth through submission, rather than destruction through resistance. Earth would advance technologically and gain security protections, but sacrifice some independence in the process. The Queen presented it as the pragmatic choice, acquiring strength through alliance rather than losing everything through futile opposition. Back aboard ship, the crew debated which loss of autonomy felt worse. Some argued combat's outright defeat would be cleaner than marriage's gradual erosion of sovereignty. Others saw the technological and defensive benefits as worth the price of shared governance. Their betting pool reflected the division, with odds shifting as different arguments gained traction. The chef stopped preparing both wedding cakes and combat rations. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units. They understood now that neither option offered perfect outcomes. Both paths involved sacrifice. The question wasn't which choice was better, but which type of loss they could endure. The ship's atmosphere shifted from speculation to sober assessment as the timer continued its countdown. Darius made his decision. The words came out clean and direct. Marriage, but with one condition. His crew would serve as honor guard for the ceremony. Not a suggestion. A requirement. The Queen's starlight eyes showed no surprise. She understood immediately. This wasn't about tradition or sentimentality. It was about maintaining loyalty in unfamiliar territory. His people would surround him during the proceedings, providing a familiar presence in an alien environment. Their presence ensured human oversight of the entire event, from preparation to execution. His condition turned their passive gambling into active participation. The crew's betting pool became irrelevant. They'd no longer be spectators placing wagers. They'd be participants shaping the outcome. Their role would require learning Naathian customs, mastering ceremonial protocols, and representing Earth during the most significant diplomatic event in human history. The Queen recognized the strategic brilliance hidden in the sentimental request. She agreed without hesitation. His loyalty to his people demonstrated exactly the quality she valued most. A commander who protected his crew even while making personal sacrifices showed deeper strength than any tactical brilliance could provide. She saw the adaptability his crew had demonstrated through previous challenges and knew they would handle the complex ceremony with professionalism. The condition transformed his personal sacrifice into shared commitment. The crew's involvement meant they'd experience the cultural exchange alongside him. They'd learn the language, understand the customs, and form their own connections with Naathian society. This wasn't just his marriage anymore. It was their collective entry into galactic politics. Back aboard the ship, the announcement changed everything. The betting pool dissolved immediately. Crew members shifted from speculation to preparation. Communications Officer Evans began researching honor guard protocols across different cultures. The chef started studying Naathian ceremonial foods alongside wedding cake designs. The ship's counselor formed a training committee to prepare everyone for their new roles. Their adaptability became their greatest asset. The same crew that had handled temporal loops and impromptu dance competitions now focused on mastering alien traditions. They understood this was more than ceremonial duty. It was their chance to ensure human interests were represented during the Union. Their presence would provide Darius with support while demonstrating Earth's capabilities to the galactic community. The Queen's quick agreement revealed her pragmatic approach. She understood that including the crew would strengthen the alliance through broader engagement. Their participation would make the marriage more than a political arrangement. It would become a partnership between civilizations, with the crew serving as the first wave of cultural exchange. The condition also served practical psychological purposes. Darius would have familiar faces around him during the overwhelming ceremony. The crew's presence would provide stability and support as he navigated his new role. Their shared experience would maintain unit cohesion during the transition from military service to diplomatic duty. Their involvement created a visual representation of the alliance. Human and Nathian forces standing together would symbolize the new partnership more effectively than any treaty signing. The image would carry across media networks on 47 worlds, demonstrating unity and mutual respect between species. The Queen's acceptance set the stage for a partnership built on understanding rather than coercion. She valued Darius's loyalty enough to accommodate his condition, showing flexibility that traditional diplomats lacked. This willingness to embrace unconventional solutions demonstrated the adaptive thinking she sought in the first place. Then the real planning began. Ceremony coordinators appeared from side chambers, data slates glowing with timelines and checklists. The crew's transition from spectators to participants became official. Their betting pool whiteboard was erased and replaced with duty rosters and training schedules. The ship's atmosphere shifted from tension to purposeful activity, as everyone prepared for their new roles in the galactic drama. The Queen's staff materialized from side chambers before the words finished leaving his mouth. Data slates glowed with schedules and checklists. The transition from ultimatum to wedding planning happened without pause. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a strategic operation with 47 stakeholder civilizations. Cuisine requirements ranged from organic sustenance to mineral-based nutrition. The banquet would serve photosynthetic soups for plant-based species, nutrient-rich rocks for lithomorphs, and traditional human dishes adjusted for alien digestive systems. Food synthesizers worked overtime creating dishes that wouldn't poison attendees from different biochemistries. The kitchen staff treated it like a military campaign against culinary disaster. Ceremonial components had to harmonize across 17 different frequency ranges. Music for auditory species, light patterns for visual beings, vibration sequences for those who felt rather than heard. The composition teams argued over harmonic convergence points where multiple sensory experiences could align. They sought moments where a light pulse might match a musical note that synchronized with a vibration pattern, creating unity across sensory divides. Media rights generated more revenue than some planetary economies. Broadcasting networks bid astronomical sums for exclusive coverage rights. The contracts included holographic capture permissions, interview access, and behind-the-scenes footage. Documentary teams from different worlds already scuffled over prime camera locations near the ceremonial platform. Security teams separated arguing camera operators with more force than they used on actual threats. Marketing committees designed merchandise for multiple species. Crystalline entities could purchase commemorative geodes containing light patterns from the ceremony. Gas-based life forms could acquire atmospheric collectors that captured ceremonial scents. Humans got the standard mugs and t-shirts, though the shirts came in fabrics that shifted colors based on emotional resonance. The merchandise had to ship before the event concluded to maximize sales momentum. The personal union became public relations masterpiece. Every aspect served dual purposes. The flowers weren't just decorative, they purified air for respiratory species. The seating arrangements weren't just about visibility, they created energy flow patterns important to certain cultures. The vows incorporated phrases that carried legal weight across multiple governance systems. Nothing was merely ceremonial. Everything performed strategic functions. Economic impacts rippled through sectors. Tourism agencies offered wedding viewing packages with luxury accommodations. Manufacturing plants shifted production to meet merchandise demands. Food suppliers contracted for exotic ingredients across star systems. The event generated employment opportunities from construction crews building temporary facilities to translators handling media inquiries in 60 languages. Back on Earth, people watched their captain's personal decision become galactic entertainment. News networks showed simulated recreations of the ceremony based on leaked details. Talk shows debated what he should wear, how he should stand, what his first words as consort should be. His face appeared on merchandise in stores before the actual event occurred. The transformation from military commander to royal figure happened through media saturation. The Queen observed the planning with calm approval. Her staff executed preparations with practiced efficiency. This wasn't their first interstellar wedding, though it might be their most complex. They moved through checklists with the precision of military operatives, which many of them had been before joining the royal event team. Each completed task brought the strategic alliance closer to reality. The walls pulsed gently, their light patterns now synchronized with the planning rhythms. Darius watched the organized chaos around him. His personal commitment had triggered machinery far beyond his understanding. The marriage would be perfect. Every detail optimized, every moment choreographed. The only unpredictable element would be his own reactions, and even those were being analyzed for maximum publicity value. 6 months into his new role, Darius faced his first real test. Not a military threat or diplomatic standoff, but a comet made of frozen musical notes that 2 civilizations considered sacred. The dispute had lasted 70 years because traditional diplomacy couldn't resolve something fundamentally illogical. The notes produced different harmonies depending on approach angles, and both species held deep cultural beliefs about which melody held priority. Negotiations always stalled when sacred songs clashed with resource claims. The Queen observed from her observation platform, her starlight eyes watching Darius work. She'd seen seasoned diplomats fail here for decades. They brought treaties, resource-sharing agreements, complex legal frameworks. The frozen notes defied all standard approaches. Their value wasn't mineral or energy-based. It was cultural, spiritual, impossible to quantify in diplomatic terms. The conflict represented everything wrong with traditional interstellar relations. Darius spent 3 days listening to both sides. Not just their arguments, but their music. He heard how the crystalline species experienced the comet's vibrations as mathematical perfection. He learned how the avian-like beings interpreted the same notes as spiritual messages from their ancestors. The problem wasn't greed or territory. It was 2 different ways of hearing the same beauty. He walked through the ship's kitchen instead of the diplomatic chambers. The food synthesizers hummed, preparing meals for crew members with different biological needs. The pasta maker sat in the corner, a simple mechanical device among the advanced technology. Darius looked at the extruder plates that shaped dough into specific forms. He considered the acoustic sensors in the entertainment system that could analyze sound frequencies. 2 ordinary tools that had never been in the same room before. His solution involved modifications that would make engineers weep. He connected the acoustic sensors to the pasta maker's control systems. The device could now shape edible filaments that matched specific sound frequencies. He programmed it to create harmonic conduits that would harvest the musical notes without damaging their integrity. The frozen notes would flow through edible tubes that preserved their acoustic properties, while allowing physical collection. The crystalline species could collect the mathematical patterns through vibration sensors. The avian beings could experience the spiritual messages through resonant chambers. Both could access the comet's resources without compromising what made them valuable. The solution used kitchen equipment to achieve what treaties couldn't: respect for both cultural perspectives while enabling practical resource sharing. The Queen watched with quiet amusement as Darius presented his creation. The pasta maker hummed peacefully beside acoustic sensors that glowed with captured harmonics. Traditional diplomats would have called it absurd. The conflicting species saw it as ingenious. They recognized the respect for their cultural needs in the unconventional approach. Implementation required careful coordination. Harvesting teams learned to operate the modified equipment with reverence for both cultural practices. The crystalline species received vibration patterns in pure data form. The avian beings experienced the notes through resonant chambers that enhanced their spiritual qualities. Both got access to the resources they needed, without desecrating what made the comet sacred. The solution cost less than 1 day of traditional negotiations. It used existing equipment rather than specialized technology. It required no complex legal frameworks or enforcement mechanisms. The simplicity became its greatest strength. Any failure could be fixed with basic tools and understanding rather than diplomatic emergencies. Back aboard the ship, the crew updated their betting pools. Not on conflict outcomes anymore, but on what common object Darius would use next. The kitchen staff took special pride in the pasta maker's new role. They started looking at all kitchen equipment as potential diplomatic tools. The chef particularly eyed the egg whisk as having untapped potential. The Queen's starlight eyes held new respect. She'd chosen Darius for his creative problem-solving. But even she hadn't anticipated kitchen tools achieving what decades of diplomacy couldn't. The solution demonstrated that sometimes the most advanced technology wasn't what you needed. Sometimes you just needed to look at ordinary objects with fresh eyes and understand what people truly valued. 6 months later, Darius watched 3 star systems maintain peace for the longest period in recorded history. The stability wasn't achieved through force or traditional treaties. It came from the alliance forged by that impossible ultimatum. His marriage to the Nathian queen became a template other civilizations studied. Diplomatic teams analyzed their interactions, their problem-solving methods, even their mealtime conversations. The model spread because it worked where previous approaches had failed. The marriage framework replaced military posturing with creative solutions. Other conflicts began resolving through similar unconventional thinking. A territorial dispute between methane-breathing species ended when someone suggested shared rotational ownership based on atmospheric conditions. A trade route conflict found resolution through synchronized delivery schedules that benefited all parties. The solutions weren't found in diplomatic handbooks. They emerged from looking at problems differently. Even established threats responded to the new approach. The Voss hegemony slowed their expansion when faced with coordinated cultural and economic responses rather than military opposition. The synthetic collective encountered firewalls designed by human pattern recognition specialists working with Nathian technologists. Pirate confederacies found their chaotic methods less effective against systems that anticipated unpredictability. Collaboration proved stronger than isolated resistance. The galaxy developed distinct preferences during negotiations. Excellent catering became standard practice after the Queen's chefs demonstrated how good food improved discussion quality. Delegations now traveled with culinary specialists alongside diplomatic staff. Menus were negotiated with the same intensity as treaty terms. The aroma of baking bread often signaled productive talks underway. Shared meals created bonds that formal discussions couldn't establish. Darius realized the best decisions often seemed impossible until you stopped overthinking them. His initial reaction to the marriage ultimatum had been panic and confusion. Now he saw it as the most logical choice among bad options. The solution hadn't been in analyzing data or running simulations. It came from accepting that some situations required leaping without perfect information. The safety of overthinking often created its own dangers. Personal bonds and humor proved more effective than weapons and threats. His relationship with the Queen started as political necessity, but grew into genuine partnership. Their private jokes during council meetings often diffused tensions that formal protocols exacerbated. The shared understanding between them allowed quicker responses to crises. Trust built through daily interaction outperformed Shinren built through signed agreements. Back aboard his old ship, the crew still maintained their betting pools. The stakes had changed. They now wagered on diplomatic outcomes, cultural exchange successes, even interspecies culinary innovations. The gambling had evolved from entertainment to active participation in shaping their new reality. Their bets reflected hopes rather than fears, possibilities rather than worst-case scenarios. The ship's economy had stabilized around positive speculation. Crew members traded prediction shares based on diplomatic milestones. The chef's wedding cake recipes became sought-after commodities after 3 successful interspecies weddings used his designs. Even the ship's cat had become something of a celebrity, its reactions to alien delegates carefully noted and analyzed for diplomatic insights. Darius sometimes visited his old crew quarters. The familiar metal walls and humming systems felt both comforting and distant. His old life as a military commander seemed like someone else's story now. The crew treated him with the same casual respect they always had, though sometimes he caught them glancing at the Nathian insignia on his uniform. The alliance had created unexpected stability across sectors that previously knew only conflict. Trade routes flourished where patrols once fought skirmishes. Cultural exchanges happened where espionage missions once operated. The transformation hadn't been instantaneous or perfect, but the direction was clear. Cooperation produced better results than confrontation. The Queen often joined him during these visits. Her presence initially made the crew nervous, but they'd adapted quickly. She'd developed a particular fondness for the ship's coffee, though she still insisted on exactly 2 sugar crystals in hers. The crew had started calling it the consort blend behind his back. Their unlikely partnership had become normal through daily practice. The impossible choice had created a new normal that worked better than the old certainty. Darius realized that security didn't always come from stronger weapons or tighter control. Sometimes it came from accepting unconventional solutions and trusting that creativity could overcome even the most entrenched conflicts. The galaxy kept turning. The bets kept being placed, and the solutions kept coming from unexpected places. The pasta maker had been just the beginning. The Alliance transformed security across 3 sectors without firing a shot. Their union proved courage and flexibility could build stronger foundations than any treaty. Darius's choice seemed absurd initially, but opened doors traditional diplomacy couldn't. Sometimes the most strategic move is the one that makes least sense at first glance. Their story demonstrates how imagination can conquer where force consistently fails. A pasta maker resolved a decades-old conflict. A coffee preference revealed deeper understanding. Real security came not from bigger weapons, but from willingness to consider the impossible.